Hey, what is going on, IK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are going to be touching on, as always, what I think are important topics. But however, I really wanted to talk about something that is more specific to your kingdom and something that probably a lot of people don't really think about too much. And I wanted to do a deep dive on city and kind of territory distribution, and often what we usually see in a lot of kingdoms, and just talk about a few different ways that you can set this up, along with some pros and cons. Now, before we get started, as always, make sure you guys sub, like, ring the notification bell. And of course, if you want to join and be a part of our conversation, you can find our Discord in the pinned comment and description down below. Okay, so let's first start off and identify, right, what are some ways that you usually see city distribution being done? So usually what we often see a lot of is kind of the typical 1/3 split. And you can usually see this based on this line here, typically going to this line. And then here usually goes to here. It includes 1, 2, 3. And then here to here, which is 1, 2, 3. Same here, 1, 2, 3. So the 1/3 split is pretty common. We've been seeing this pretty much for the most part since the start of the game. And then you might also see some variations of this where if you're kind of in a mega alliance type structure, or you just have an alliance that's stronger than the rest, you might have something where they might just take all 9 of the capitals, or maybe they'll take half of the capitals, right, of the higher level capitals, your 9s and 7s. Maybe they'll take specific cities and buffs, right? And we'll briefly talk about a few of these. So again, you can see here that if you kind of start off with, and we'll just kind of briefly show it like this based on city levels, while my dog is hawking a loogie, I'm sure. Right, you can see here that you get the immortal attack at 8% from the level 9 capitals, right? You'll also get troop HP. This is when you start getting to essentially kind of your level 8 cities. I'll show you some of the initial levels too. Oh, never mind. These got bumped up because of the patch. But usually these would be like your 8s. Then you have your 9s. But for these ones, where you got the 2.5% HP, you got 3 HP, 2.5, and these are just for like the non or goes. And then this one is 4% attack for your level 12. And then here again, right, 3% HP, 2.5% HP. You got some more HP here, right? Then we get, and you notice the trend here, right? You got the HP cities here that are bordering. And I believe these should be your 9s and your 8s. And then eventually we'll get going out a little bit more, and then you get to like your RSS zone 3, and you can see here like on the initial levels, right, like 14, you got the 13s, and I'll just show you these, right? So 13s is HP same, 12, 2.5% HP. Then we get to 11, and this is where you get the attack. Now HP is important to an extent because from what we understand, HP also factors into your skill damage, right, based on how much current HP you have when the skill is activated. So from here, though, right, it just depends on what you do, right? You might have, depending on how your structure, how your kingdom is set up, right, some people that want specific cities for their reasons. But now let me kind of briefly transition here. We talked about just a few formats, but let me kind of give you a kind of what I refer to as like an outlier format. This is something that, at least to my knowledge, right, that I had come up with, or came up with, I should say, and we had tested this throughout a few of my previous projects, more specifically kind of realizing this towards the end of my first project. We tested it out a little bit more in the second, but really hammered it home in the third with being as efficient as we could, at least for the time that I was there. Now, the way that essentially the system is set up is you distribute based on RSS zones, right? So you have, I think it's 33, if I remember this correctly. It's like 33, 21, 20, or 2019, I think that's what it is, right? Let's count real quick so I can make sure I'm accurate. So for blue, what do I have? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So it is 20. That means that this is 19, and then I believe the outer should be 33. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong. And then you have the middle, which is 9. So the way that we did this was we distributed cities by saying, hey, one of the top, in this case, 33. Let me just double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 30, 31, 32, 33. Okay, so just make sure I was right. So, right, we'll say the top 33 alliances get one RSS Zone 1 city. Then you'll say the top 20 will get one RSS Zone 2 city. And then one of the top 19 will get an RSS Zone 3 city, and one of the top 9 gets RSS Zone 4 cities, right? You kind of do this by the time it comes up. One of the reasons I like, and I'm going to talk about the pros and cons, mainly of like these two formats, which is like this format versus kind of the 1/3 split format, because these are starting from what I understand to be a little bit more common with the RSS Zone split format after I did a previous video on it, but I really want this one to be the one I hammer at home on, is that when you're doing an RSS zone split format, you are taking into account for the most part, the current ranking system on the leaderboard, right? And then you're also being able to factor in other outliers, right? Like, are these alliances on board with kind of being pro-kingdom? Are they not? Are they just pro-alliance, or are they just kind of their own independent, right? Then you can kind of figure out where is the best place that we can put this alliance or these players, right, when it comes to how we're allocating or distributing cities. Obviously, you probably wouldn't necessarily give an alliance that is rogue or something like that, right? You probably wouldn't take them into consideration for the most part. However, one of the other great benefits about this system is that it goes beyond factions, right? Because you're distributing based on kind of the global ranking rather than doing it based on a third split, which means that every alliance that is active and participating and engaged, and let's just say this is the ideal situation, everyone gets an equal amount. And it also allows for you to keep the most amount of active players involved in the kingdom from day one. Most kingdoms usually kind of fall into the trap of vying for territory, not really communicating between each other, and oftentimes they'll just kind of take whatever they're able to. If they have to fight a little bit, they will. And this just alienates a lot of players and a lot of alliances early on, albeit done indirectly, right? Now, and then if we just kind of briefly talk about if you're doing like a 1/3 map split, some of the challenges, and probably the most biggest challenge with doing a standard 1/3 map split, is that when you do that, let's say that we kind of, again, we'll just kind of use a standard one here. Let's just take the 1/3 here, right? Drifta, Nursig, and Tipizetical. I always butcher that one, I'm sure. Is that, let's say that this is red, let's say this is blue, this is green. If red has 5 alliances, blue has 3 alliances, and green up here has 2 alliances, which region do you think is benefiting their alliances more? Well, green, because they have a set amount of cities that they can distribute between 2 alliances. Whereas red, let's say red has the number 1 alliance, but because they have 5 alliances, right, that are active, they have to distribute a set amount of cities, which is the same that everyone else gets for the most part, between 5 alliances, right? That means that they're not really getting as much city, not as much income, not as much troop buffs as well, or titles that they can give out to players, right? Just kind of per alliance. So there are inherent drawbacks with this type of system. In addition, you now have to do the micromanaging as well between each faction to distribute cities however you see fit, between the active alliances or however many alliances you designate, right? The challenge with this is that if you have a set amount of territory, you might already be limiting yourself even more than you think. Why? Because if you have a limited amount of territory, you may not be willing to split your territory between 5 alliances. You might just say, hey, we're just going to split it between 3 alliances, which means now you've alienated 2 other alliances within your 5 that are active within your faction, which now just causes more player drop-off and more activity to drop and less player retention you're keeping. And this can apply even in smaller instances, right? Let's say you have 3 down here for blue, but you only want 2 alliances to split the cities, right? For whatever reason, now you're alienating 1 alliance, which means 1 player. Now, or the players there, now you're forcing those players to either have to go and join another alliance, fight potentially, or maybe switch factions, right? And a portion of those players, because they're now being forced into a position that they probably didn't want to be forced into, may leave the kingdom, they may stop playing, they may lower activity, which eventually leads to more player drop-off. There's a lot of negative impacts that can happen when you are starting off. That does not necessarily apply to kingdoms that have been open for 6 months, a year, or longer, where you already are established, right? So if you're looking to kind of apply this system, this really more so focuses on how to keep the most amount of player activity and the most amount of player retention from the beginning of your server's life. Now, I still love this system, don't get me wrong. I still love this system across the board. But if you're in a kingdom where you might only have 1 or 2 active alliances, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to apply this type of a system, right? And that's where you have to be getting a little more creative, right? If you're in a server where you have only a few alliances or 1 alliance, you can just kind of take the best of the best, right? It doesn't really matter at that point. If you're in a 2 alliance server, then you kind of might split the best of the best, right? You might have 1 alliance take 5 capitals, 1 takes 4, right? But then maybe you give a level 9 or something like that to try and equate out some of the buffs. There's ways to do it, right? Because you have to consider if you have, right, if each alliance can have, gosh, I think the max is 15 or so cities that you're able to get. So if you, right, divide that into, right, I think it's 81, right, you end up at, 75 would be 5 alliances, right? Because 2 is 30. So, no, 65. So you'd have 5 alliances, which would put you at 75, right? Maybe 5.5, right? Active alliances, if you're looking to max cities out per alliance, that a server can hold. Sure, that sounds great. Sure, some people might think 3, 4, 5 alliances, right? Like, that's a good amount that you can have. But the objective is to try and really keep as much activity as you can for as long as you can, because of the fact that you just know player drop-off is going to be there, right? And if you cut too much fat early, that can have negative implications. You want that to be organic and a natural filter, right? A natural slimming of the player base. You do not want to force that slimming. And that's something that I think, I probably could talk about that even in another video, right? That's kind of a really like super advanced like macro view on how to just keep player activity. I'm giving away secrets. I don't even know I'm doing it. But anyways, those are just some things I wanted to talk about in today's video that I think are just very important if you're starting off in a new kingdom, and just ways that you can keep the kingdom as healthy and as sustainable for as long as you possibly can. And then if you're in a kingdom that has already been up for a while, right, what are some things that you can do there? I hope you guys enjoyed this take on what I think is really important, and just some different approaches that you can take to how you're going to distribute cities and distributing territory as well within your kingdom. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. I'd love to know, right? Have you had success doing an RSS zone split in the beginning? Are you in a 1, 2, 3 alliance server, and maybe you guys have a specific approach, right? Again, I think the great thing about kingdom builders is that there's always different ways to approach. There's different ways to apply systems, even though for specific systems at certain times in a kingdom's life, right, I definitely favor some over others for some of the reasons I listed, but I would still love to know what you guys are running. What have you been running? Have you even changed systems and found improvement, right? I'd love to know. Let me know down there in the comments. And that's it for me. Until next time, we will catch you later.